Hello, everyone. We wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for joining us today. This podcast was recorded and is made available to you by Whitley Penn LLP and WPWealth LLP solely for informational purposes. The information, views, and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature and are not intended to be construed as the provision of financial or investment advice by Whitley Penn or WP Wealth. The information discussed in this podcast is accurate as of the day it was recorded, but may then become outdated over time. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, comments, or concerns in regard to the content presented. Thank you again for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome back to the next installment of Start Now, Success Later. My name is Brandon Russ and I'm an advisor at Whitley Penn in the WP Wealth Group. Today I have a special guest joining me, Ryan Heath of Baker Heath. Ryan is here today to discuss why, as even a young adult, you should consider developing an estate plan. Ryan is a trust and estate attorney located here in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex with a primary focus on business owners, families, and financial institutions. Ryan has been named one of Texas Super Lawyers' Rising Stars in 2020 and 2021, so I can't think of anyone better to have on the podcast for this topic. Ryan, thank you for coming on, and how's it going today?
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. What a great time of year it is. We have football starting up, pros on Thursday. College football is here and cooler weather on the horizons.
Yes, my Boilermakers got a win to start off college football, so that's always great, and I can't wait for the NFL this weekend. So very exciting time, of course. Can you quickly introduce yourself and kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So to start, I'm not from Texas, but I got here just as fast as I could from the Mississippi Gulf Coast originally. Went to LSU for undergrad, so I had a very rough weekend losing against the Bruins, and met my wife at LSU, and then we moved to Fort Worth back in 2011, and went to Texas A&M Law School, and have been practicing in primarily estate planning since that time, but for the last 6 years exclusively in estate planning. And I work with folks at all walks of life, from folks that are starting families to high net worth individuals, professional athletes, celebrities, that sort of thing.
Awesome. So of all the topics that we've covered so far on this podcast, I think estate planning may be the most foreign to some of our listeners. Can you quickly explain what is estate planning?
Sure. So estate planning is often thought of as just a will, or it's something that only wealthy people do. And in fact, estate planning is much more than just a will, and it's meant for everyone, not just those that are extremely wealthy. Estate planning is the process of preparing documents that determine, one, where your property passes at your death, but more importantly, two, who would make medical and financial decisions for you if you ever became incapacitated, and three, most importantly, for those of you that have children, who's going to take care of your children if something happens to you and the other parent.
Yeah, and I think guardianship was actually something I didn't even think about until our planning call. So I'm really glad you brought that up. We'll touch on that here in a minute. But as you were saying, there is a big misconception with estate planning that it only applies to the super wealthy. So as a young person just starting their career, we don't have an abundance of wealth built up yet. So why is estate planning important for a younger person?
Yeah, so let's start with what happens without an estate plan. I think that's always a great place to start. Without an estate plan, ultimately the state of Texas is going to decide who gets your property, who makes decisions for you, and who gets your children. And so by creating an estate plan, regardless of wealth, you can achieve a couple of goals. One is that you can avoid court involvement in your life. And that could be guardianship, which we talked about a few minutes ago. Guardianship is not only needed for minor children, it's also could be needed for you if you ever became unable to take care of yourself, either physically or financially. Secondly, like I mentioned before, you get to choose who gets your property when you pass away and who makes those medical and financial decisions. And sometimes more importantly is that you can make the decision of who should not make decisions for you if something happens to you.
Right. And, if you do become incapacitated, those are some things that you'll want to think about. You won't be able to make that decision, obviously, if you are incapacitated. I saw a quote on your website: "Failure to plan is planning to fail," and I think that that's pretty great for your line of work. But what are the basic estate planning documents a person should have?
Yeah, so everyone, regardless of wealth or station in life, should have what I consider to be the 5 core estate planning documents. So first, and probably the most familiar among our listeners, would be a will. And what a will does is a couple of things, actually. It designates who gets property. It designates who takes care of your estate. And third, if you have minor children, your will would determine or would nominate certain people to take care of your children if that need for guardianship arose. There are also financial and medical powers of attorney. So we often think that as young adults that our parents can continue to make decisions for us after we're 18 or in college or out of the house. But in fact, our parents' ability to make financial and medical decisions for us stops once we reach 18. And so if you want your parents to serve in those roles, then you need to designate that person as a financial or medical power of attorney for you. So on the financial side, financial power of attorney says my mom can make financial decisions for me, and that can be effective immediately, or you can make it effective only in the event you become incapacitated in the future. On the medical side of things, there's a medical power of attorney. And with what we've been through in the last year to year and a half, we certainly know that regardless of our age, there is a potential chance that we end up in the hospital. And if we ever become incapacitated, a medical power of attorney designates someone to step in and make medical decisions for you.
Sorry to cut you off there, but have you noticed, or do you see a lot of college kids get these before they go off to school? Is that something that is pretty popular? I mean, especially now with COVID.
We do. We see that often, especially for clients of ours that have their children going off to college out of state or out of the immediate area. A frequent issue that we encounter would be getting a phone call from a client in a panic. Their child's been in some sort of accident on campus, and they can't find out what's happening, what's going on, because that child is as an adult. And by having just those basic medical and financial documents in place, that would alleviate their concerns and also ensure that that child who's now in college is protected.
All right.
Just a couple of other documents I wanted to hit on quickly. One is a HIPAA authorization. What I tell my clients here is the threshold question is, if you're in the hospital, who can call and find out what's going on? So that could be more than just mom and dad. It could be siblings. It could be a girlfriend or boyfriend, whoever you would want to be able to call and find out what's going on. This is the document that would designate those people. And again, not to focus this entire conversation on COVID, but in a time right now where we're not able to go into the hospital and be with our family and friends, it's really important they have that phone access to find out what's going on. And the last document is probably not as meaningful to folks our age, but definitely for folks as you start to get older, would be a directive to physicians. It's also known as a living will or advance directive. And that document simply decides whether or not you should be given palliative care, essentially pain management treatments, or be kept plugged into life-sustaining treatments in the event you have a terminal condition or an irreversible illness. So again, there, just to summarize, you're essentially looking at end-of-life decisions and what sort of care is provided to you.
So of these documents, which are typically the most common among younger people? And can you give us a timeline of when it starts to make sense to consider each document?
Sure. So from a practical perspective as a young professional, a large portion of you are going to see a substantial increase in wealth over the next 10 years.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so as your wealth increases, and or your stage of life changes, you're going to need some documents in place. And it's better to start now than to start when you're behind the 8 ball and trying to catch up and your plate's full or overflowing. And to me, the core documents are really those 5. But I think for folks that are in their 20s, even in their 30s, kind of just starting families, getting that will in place just to alleviate court costs and headaches for family members if something happens to you. Getting medical and financial powers of attorney in place so that if you're ever out of the country and need to take care of something, or if you're in some sort of accident, just having someone named to step in and make decisions for you. Because until you're married, there is no one really designated as a primary except for maybe parents under state law. But there's definitely going to be a time lapse between when something happens to you and when someone can step in and take care of those things for you.
So as far as things like drafting a will and the various medical directives, is this something that, I can get done now and be set for the future, or will I have to come back over time and update these?
Yeah, so documents are meant to be flexible, but at the same time, as your stage of life changes, the documents would be changed to adapt to it. Similar to a financial plan, right? When you're first coming out of college and you're first starting your investments, that's going to look a lot different than it is in 5 to 10 years as your life changes and you accumulate more wealth and you grow a family. And so, typically it's a really good idea to get some core documents in place, and then we can make minor adjustments to those documents as things change. As you get married, as you have children, as you change careers, we can adapt those documents to your specific situation.
So these documents and all the work that you do, they can be pretty costly, especially for a younger person right out of school. What are your thoughts on using something like LegalZoom or EP Navigator as a more cost-effective option for attaining these documents? We're not sponsored, so feel free to speak your mind.
Yeah, so I can only tell you from my experience what I've seen in those documents. And what you'll find is there are a lot of places for the user to type in their wishes, whether it's I want my Ferrari to go to my sister, or my Pokemon collection to go to my hated cousin, or whatever it may be. And so because of that, because it's not prepared completely by an attorney, we often find that the long-term costs exceed the upfront savings.
Pretty cut and paste, standard template documents.
Exactly. And there are specific things that a will in Texas needs to have in order to go through the court probate process after death smoothly and as cost effective as possible. And a lot of these software drafting programs are not state specific, and so they don't have that special language that's needed to keep costs down.
And then, God forbid if something was to happen to me and I didn't have the proper documents in place. You kind of touched on this earlier, but what happens?
Sure. So if you don't have an estate plan in place, then the state of Texas has created an estate plan for you. And what that looks like is it's called an heirship proceeding. And so a court hearing is held. Several attorneys are involved, one to represent your family, one to represent what's called unknown heirs. There's a complete genealogy basically created of your family history.
Wow.
Which involves a lot of attorney time, which is obviously going to lead to a lot of cost. And then in that scenario, it could end up passing to siblings or folks that you don't have a very close relationship to. And also the time period is much longer when there's not a will in place. So what you end up seeing is maybe, estate proceedings dragging on for a year, maybe 2 or 3 years, which is pretty tough on the family that's left behind.
Is that similar to probate?
Yes, that is probate.
Okay. Exactly. So yes, probate, I don't really know if a lot of our listeners will know what probate is, but the thing to know is that it's expensive. It kind of exposes you to the public, and there's no guarantee that what you want to go to someone will go to that person.
That's a fair summary. So when you have a will and that will goes through probate, the process is just much more streamlined. And so, a typical probate when someone passes away can be anywhere between $2,500 to $5,000. When you compare that to what an heirship proceeding costs, it can easily be $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 in legal fees and in time. And like you said, there's always a public disclosure element to probate where your will is made public. Your family history is made public if there is no will, and also your assets are disclosed to the public, and that can often create the tendency or the desire to create a creditor challenge or to raise some sort of issue and try to claim money that's not rightfully theirs.
Right. So, you may have the sticker shock of these documents now, but it sounds like it's worth it in the long run to avoid probate and heirship. What'd you call it again?
Yeah, a determination of heirship proceeding.
Right. So I kind of want to switch gears here for a little bit. So let's say that I'm getting ready to start my own business. What role will estate planning play if I'm looking to go out and start my own business?
Yeah, so estate planning and business are directly intertwined. So anytime you start a business, there is a whole set of additional considerations that are created regarding, one, who's going to take over your business if you become incapacitated? Two, what happens upon your death? Do you have children that are young and aren't going to take over the business? So is a sale a better option? Do you have a sibling that's in the business with you that maybe you want to create a sale to that sibling so that money passes to your estate? There are a lot of different estate planning elements in the business planning process. And additionally, there are certain asset protection features with an estate plan that can benefit you as you start your business to make sure that your family's protected.
All right. And then what about a young person who may be on the verge of receiving an inheritance? Is there any planning that needs to be involved there?
Yeah, with a lot of my clients who are expecting their parents to pass away soon, they often come to me with questions about what to do with their estate plan. And really what needs to happen is there needs to be a conversation with those parents. I know that can be uncomfortable sometimes, but just making sure that their estate plan is set up in such a way that you receive it from a tax perspective and from an asset protection perspective in a beneficial way. And so by having your parents set up a trust for your benefit, by having them have their own will set up correctly and their powers of attorney set up correctly, all of that is going to ensure that your inheritance, one, is maximized by reducing court costs and involvement, and two, that whatever you receive is protected from a spouse, a creditor, or the estate tax.
Gotcha. So what kind of resources are out there for people who are wanting to learn more about estate planning?
Yeah, I always go back to the fact that as a young professional coming out, that you need to rely on the three legs of the bar stool. And to me, the three legs of that bar stool that keep your financial life stable are a financial advisor, a CPA, and an estate planning attorney. And so, lean on, for example, WPWealth puts out great materials on estate planning. There are various podcasts out there and blogs. You can even find webinars done by local estate planning attorneys that will kind of walk through the common documents and what you need to put in place.
I think that bar stool is really great. It's kind of a team of people you have behind you, and you need all of them to kind of support your plan. So I think that's a really great visual. Ryan, thank you for coming on. Do you have any final thoughts to wrap this up?
Yeah, for anyone out here listening, if you've got questions about the estate planning process, what documents you may need in place, either from a business perspective or an estate planning perspective, please feel free to reach out to me. While I am an estate planning attorney full-time, I always try to make time to just catch up with folks and give them advice and recommendations on creating a plan that will benefit them in the long run.
Where can people find you then?
Yeah, so you can find me on our website. It's www.bakerheath.com. You can also give us a phone call. It's 817-769-2745. Or shoot me an email at ryan@bakerheath.com.
Also check him out on LinkedIn. And all of you guys, thank you for tuning in again this week. Please like, comment, subscribe to the Whitley Penn Talks podcast channel wherever you listen to your podcast. And also visit our website, www.wpwealth.com, and give us and Ryan a follow on LinkedIn. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks.